For centuries, people have asked the same question. How did ancient Egyptians build the pyramids? The theories range from the ridiculous to the spectacular. But what if I told you that the actual answer, backed by decades of archaeological evidence, is so remarkable that it makes all the conspiracy theories look ordinary by comparison? The real builders of the pyramids weren't visitors from another world. They were organized, skilled, and remarkably sophisticated, and their story begins thousands of years ago in the Nile Valley. In recent years, the internet has been flooded with clickbait headlines claiming that artificial intelligence systems have finally solved the pyramid mystery. Videos with titles like Grok AI finally reveals who built the pyramids flood social media platforms, attracting millions of views from people desperate to learn the truth. But these videos are fabrications. No AI has discovered any revolutionary secret about pyramid construction. These sensationalized videos exploit our fascination with mysteries and our skepticism about ancient capabilities. They offer easy answers to complex questions and the false promise that technology can uncover hidden truths that scholars have somehow missed or covered up. What we actually know about how the pyramids were built comes from something far more reliable than sensational YouTube content. It comes from decades of rigorous archaeological investigation, careful analysis of ancient records, examination of worker settlements, study of tool marks on stones, and the painstaking work of Egyptologists who have devoted their careers to understanding one of history's greatest achievements. This evidence has been accumulated systematically, analyzed thoroughly, and published in scholarly journals where other experts can review and challenge the findings. This is how reliable knowledge is constructed. The pyramid myth has deep roots in human consciousness. Since the pyramids were first observed by Greek historians like Herodotus in the 5th century before Christ, people have struggled to believe that ancient peoples could have built something so massive and precise without supernatural or extraterrestrial assistance. This skepticism says far more about us than it does about the ancient Egyptians. We live in an age of industrial machinery and computerized engineering, yet we cannot imagine that people without these tools could organize themselves to accomplish something extraordinary. But the evidence tells a very different story, one that is actually more impressive than any alien theory because it reveals the true capabilities of human ingenuity, determination, and social organization. Let's begin with the timeline. The most famous pyramids at Giza were not the first pyramids ever built in Egypt. The story of pyramid construction begins earlier, during the 3rd dynasty, around 2700 BCE. King Djoser commissioned Imhotep, one of ancient Egypt's greatest architects, to design his tomb. Imhotep created the step pyramid at Saqqara, a revolutionary structure that evolved from the traditional flat-roofed tombs called mastabas. This pyramid was built in stages, first as a mastaba, then expanded layer by layer into the world's first monumental stone structure. This was the beginning, and it proved that Egyptians understood how to work with massive quantities of stone and organize labor on an unprecedented scale. The transition to true pyramids with smooth sides came during the reign of King Snefru, founder of the 4th dynasty, around 2680 to 2660 BCE. Snefru was prolific as a pyramid builder, commissioning multiple pyramids during his reign. At Meidum, a step pyramid was constructed and then filled in with stone and covered with limestone casing, representing an intermediate stage in pyramid design. The bent pyramid at Dashur shows evidence of design changes mid-construction, with the angle of the sides changing partway up the structure. These imperfect pyramids are actually invaluable to understanding how ancient builders learned and refined their techniques. The errors they contain teach us that these structures were built through experimentation, adjustment, and continuous improvement, not through any magical or extraterrestrial knowledge. Then came the Great Pyramid of Khufu during the 4th dynasty, around 2560 BCE. This is the largest pyramid ever built, and originally the world's tallest structure at 481 feet. Today it stands at 455 feet, after losing its outer casing stones over millennia. This pyramid contains approximately 2.3 million stone blocks, with a total weight of around 6 million tons. When you consider that the structure was built over a period of roughly 20 to 30 years using tools made from copper, wood, and stone, the accomplishment becomes truly staggering. This was not the work of beings with advanced technology. This was the work of human beings who understood mathematics, engineering, and the principles of construction with remarkable sophistication. Understanding the workforce is central to understanding how the pyramids were actually built. For a long time, popular culture perpetuated the image of slaves, whipping workers, and forcing them to build monuments under brutal conditions. This narrative is not supported by archaeological evidence. Instead, what archaeologists have discovered tells a very different and far more interesting story. The pyramids were built by organized paid workers, many of them Egyptian citizens who worked in rotating shifts and received compensation for their labor. Some worked as permanent staff throughout the year, while others worked seasonal shifts, often contributing their labor in place of taxes, similar to how conscription or civic duty functions in modern societies. The workers didn't toil anonymously in darkness. They were part of organized teams with identities and recognition. The gang names found on quarry stones show that workers took pride in their affiliations, much like modern construction crews identify themselves. These work gangs competed with one another, maintained records of their productivity, and received recognition for their contributions. The organization reflected a sophisticated understanding of human motivation and labor management. The workforce estimates vary among researchers based on different calculation methods. Physicist Kurt Mendelsohn suggested the workforce may have been as many as 50,000 men at most. Ludwig Borchardt and Louis Kroon placed the number at 36,000 workers. According to archaeologist Miroslav Werner, a workforce of no more than 30,000 was needed for the Great Pyramid's construction. Most scholars agree that approximately 5,000 workers were permanent employees receiving regular salaries, with the remaining workforce consisting of temporary laborers who worked 3 to 4 month shifts while receiving subsistence compensation of 10 loaves of bread and a jug of beer per day. Zahi Hawass, one of the world's foremost Egyptologists, believes that the majority of workers may have been volunteers who considered it an honor to participate in building their pharaoh's eternal monument. Of the total workforce, approximately 4,000 workers were laborers specifically tasked with quarrying stone, hauling blocks to the pyramid, and setting the blocks in place. The remainder were supervisors, engineers, accountants, cooks, doctors, and other support staff necessary to maintain such a massive operation. The most compelling evidence for organized, well-treated workers comes from archaeological excavations at worker settlements near the pyramids. These settlements have revealed remarkable details about the lives of the people who built these monuments. Researchers have discovered that workers lived in structured housing, received medical care when injured, ate well with diets that included meat and fish in addition to bread, and were given respectful burials upon their death. Some workers' tombs found near the pyramids bear inscriptions indicating their pride in having participated in the construction. This is not the pattern we would expect from enslaved or brutalized populations. Instead, this evidence points to an organized society where workers were valued members of the construction enterprise. The organization required to manage such a massive project was itself a remarkable achievement. The pyramids didn't appear suddenly on the landscape. They were the result of careful planning, detailed record-keeping, and sophisticated management systems. Archaeological evidence shows that workers were organized into gangs with specific names and responsibilities. Quarry marks found on stone blocks identify the work gangs who extracted them, often bearing names like craftsman gang or similar designations. This record-keeping suggests that supervisors maintained detailed information about who cut which stones, when they were cut, and how they were transported. Such organizational sophistication indicates a complex administrative apparatus that coordinated thousands of workers across multiple work sites simultaneously. Transportation of stone was itself an engineering challenge that required innovation and planning. The limestone blocks that make up the bulk of the pyramids were quarried locally on the Giza Plateau itself. Granite stones used for interior chambers and portions of the casing came from the Aswan quarries, hundreds of miles away. The most prized limestone casing stones came from Tura, across the Nile River. How did workers transport these massive blocks? Ancient records and modern experiments have provided clear answers. The Tura limestone was floated down the Nile River during seasonal flooding, transported through specially constructed canals to the edge of the Giza Plateau. Once stones arrived at the plateau, workers used wooden sledges to drag them into position. Experiments conducted by archaeologists using ancient methods have shown that large teams pulling sledges with ropes could indeed move massive stone blocks across sand with reasonable efficiency, especially when the sand was dampened to reduce friction. The Egyptians understood this principle and likely moistened the sand pathways to facilitate stone movement. The tools used by ancient pyramid builders were entirely adequate for the task, though they seem primitive by modern standards. Egyptian workers possessed copper tools including chisels, drills, and saws. While copper is softer than the stone these tools needed to cut, copper is still capable of cutting limestone through sustained effort and proper technique. Experiments with copper tools have demonstrated that workers could indeed quarry limestone blocks using methods that left distinctive tool marks on the stones, marks that match exactly what archaeologists find on pyramid blocks. Workers also used wooden wedges that, when driven into stone and then wetted to cause expansion, could split blocks along natural fracture lines. Stone-pounding tools and wooden mallets completed the toolkit. These simple tools, in the hands of skilled and experienced workers, could accomplish what seems nearly impossible to modern observers unfamiliar with ancient techniques. The quarries themselves provide physical evidence of how stones were extracted. Quarries at Aswan and elsewhere show the characteristic traces of ancient extraction methods. Deep trenches mark where workers separated blocks from the bedrock. The partially extracted blocks that remain in quarries show the techniques workers used, including the placement of wooden wedges and evidence of progressive cutting. The waste material from quarrying accumulated in vast piles that can still be seen today. When archaeologists examine these quarries, they see a systematic approach to extracting blocks, with workers following established procedures and removing stones in logical sequences that maximized efficiency while maintaining the integrity of the quarry face to prevent catastrophic collapses. The quarry marks and partially completed extractions provide us with a detailed record of the techniques used. Analysis of these marks shows evidence of drilling with copper bits, cutting with copper saws, and strategic placement of wedges that exploited natural fracture lines in the stone. The walls of ancient quarries still bear the marks left by tools, tool trails showing the wear patterns created by repeated use. This tangible evidence of quarrying methods provides direct archaeological confirmation of how ancient Egyptians actually extracted the enormous quantities of stone needed for pyramid construction. Once stones were cut and transported to the pyramid site, the actual construction of the pyramid itself began. The precision required was extraordinary. The Great Pyramid's sides are aligned to the cardinal directions with remarkable accuracy, deviating by less than a fraction of a degree. The foundation is level to within mere centimeters despite covering an area of more than 13 acres. The sides slope at consistent angles that match precisely from side to side. How did workers achieve this accuracy without modern surveying equipment? The answer lies in the sophistication of ancient Egyptian mathematics and geometry. Evidence from papyri and other ancient documents shows that Egyptian mathematicians understood geometric principles. They used simple tools like knotted ropes, water levels, plumb bobs, and shadow measurements to establish straight lines, level surfaces, and accurate angles. While the tools were simple, the principles behind their use were sound and based on careful observation of natural phenomena. As blocks were moved into place, they were set with remarkable precision. The joints between blocks are so tight that a knife blade cannot be inserted between many of them, despite the enormous weight pressing down. This wasn't achieved through some mysterious force, but through careful preparation of surfaces and meticulous placement. Workers would place blocks and then adjust their position until they fit precisely with their neighbors. The effort required was immense, but the methods were entirely practical. The weight of the blocks themselves, pressing down from above as the pyramid grew taller, helped lock each stone firmly into place. The internal structure of the pyramid included passages and chambers, but these weren't ceremonial spaces that required perfection. Instead, the internal layout served practical purposes during construction. Some chambers distributed weight and stress, others provided access for workers and materials, and some served as ventilation. Recent research using cosmic ray imaging has revealed previously unknown voids within the pyramid, including a space rivaling the Grand Gallery in size. These spaces were likely used during construction to facilitate the movement of blocks and the organization of work. The timeline for pyramid construction was substantial, but not impossibly long. The Great Pyramid was built over approximately 20 to 30 years during Khufu's reign. With a workforce of thousands working in shifts, with some workers employed year-round and others in seasonal rotations, moving approximately 2.3 million blocks meant placing roughly 200 to 300 blocks per day on average. While this seems like an enormous number, distributed across thousands of workers in an organized system, it becomes manageable. Modern experiments have shown that teams of workers using ancient methods can indeed move and place stone blocks at rates that would allow the pyramid to be built within this time frame. The sophistication of Egyptian engineering becomes even more apparent when we consider the mathematical knowledge required. The slope angles of pyramids, the proportions of chambers, the alignment with celestial bodies, and the structural calculations needed to prevent collapse all indicate that pyramid builders possessed advanced mathematical understanding. Some scholars have noted that the Great Pyramid's dimensions incorporate ratios and proportions that reveal understanding of geometric principles. The base divided by the height gives ratios close to pi, suggesting knowledge of mathematical relationships. Whether this was intentional or coincidental remains debated, but it demonstrates the mathematical sophistication available to ancient Egyptian engineers. The alignment of pyramid sides to true north is accurate to within a fraction of a degree, an achievement that required sophisticated surveying and astronomical observation. Workers tracked the positions of stars to establish true north, using instruments like the Merkit, which allowed them to sight on specific stars and establish directional references. The precision required to align a structure over 13 acres to the cardinal directions demanded careful observation, mathematical calculation, and skilled execution. This wasn't luck or accident, but the result of knowledge, planning, and careful workmanship. The pyramid complex wasn't simply a pyramid standing alone. Each pyramid was part of an elaborate system of buildings and structures. A valley temple stood at the edge of the Nile, where boats delivered materials and visiting nobility. A causeway connected the valley temple to a mortuary temple adjacent to the pyramid. Chapels and smaller structures surrounded the main pyramid. Mastabas, the tombs of nobles and high officials, clustered near the pyramid. The entire complex required planning, coordination, and construction expertise. Remnants of funerary boats discovered at Giza, with the most famous example being the reconstructed solar boat of Khufu, show the craftsmanship Egyptian builders achieved in other domains. These boats weren't used practically, but were ritual objects intended to carry the pharaoh in the afterlife. The skill required to construct these vessels matches the skill required to quarry and position pyramid blocks. The complexity of managing all these components demonstrates sophisticated project management, with different crews working simultaneously on different elements while maintaining coordination and adherence to timelines and specifications. Archaeological evidence continues to reveal new information about pyramid construction. Modern scanning technologies using cosmic rays have allowed researchers to probe the internal structure of pyramids without invasive excavation. The Scan Pyramids project, led by researchers from Cairo University and the Heritage Innovation Preservation Institute in France, has employed these non-invasive techniques to examine the Great Pyramid's interior. This research has revealed previously unknown passages and voids, contributing to our understanding of the pyramid's internal organization and construction sequence. Each new discovery fits within the framework of what we already know about ancient Egyptian engineering, rather than contradicting it. Worker settlements excavated near the pyramids provide intimate details about construction life. Archaeological evidence from these settlements shows that workers' housing was organized into neighborhoods with communal facilities, including ovens for baking bread, slaughtering areas for meat preparation, and facilities for water storage and distribution. Workers received medical care from physicians, who set broken bones and treated illnesses common to laborers engaged in heavy physical work. Dental problems were addressed, and evidence shows that abscesses were sometimes drained surgically. The medical care extended to workers' families, indicating that these communities were permanent settlements, not temporary camps. Workers were buried in orderly cemeteries with grave goods indicating their status and roles. Some graves bore inscriptions identifying the deceased's occupation or work gang, suggesting that workers took pride in their participation in the construction project. The diet of pyramid workers has been extensively studied through archaeological analysis of food, remains found in worker settlements, and through analysis of skeletal remains that reveal nutritional status. Workers received regular rations of bread, which was a dietary staple produced in communal bakeries within the settlements. Animal bones found in settlement refuse indicate that workers consumed meat and fish, suggesting that their diet was more varied and nutritious than one might expect for a conscripted or enslaved workforce. Evidence shows workers received cattle, fish, and poultry as part of their compensation. Nutritional analysis of skeletal remains shows that pyramid workers were generally healthy and well-nourished, with growth patterns indicating adequate childhood nutrition as well. Dental analysis reveals that workers suffered from occupational wear on their teeth, but dental disease rates were relatively low. This comprehensive evidence about worker health and nutrition paints a picture of people who were valued, well-cared-for members of society, not disposable labor. The question of motivation is equally important to understanding pyramid construction. Why would workers, even if well-treated and well-fed, work so hard on such a massive project? The answer lies in understanding ancient Egyptian religious and social values. The pyramid was the pharaoh's eternal house, a structure that would allow him to achieve immortality and continue serving his divine function in the afterlife. In ancient Egyptian society, the pharaoh was considered a god incarnate, the intermediary between the human and divine worlds. Ensuring the pharaoh's successful transition to the afterlife and his continuation of divine functions was essential for maintaining cosmic order and ensuring Egypt's prosperity. For ordinary Egyptians, participation in such a sacred project was an honor, a contribution to something larger than themselves. Archaeological evidence suggests that many workers viewed their participation in pyramid construction as spiritually significant, not merely as labor or taxation. From an engineering standpoint, the knowledge required to build pyramids wasn't exotic or revolutionary. Principles of ramp construction, pulley systems, lever mechanics, and basic mathematics were well within the capability of ancient peoples. Simple inclined planes could have been used to raise blocks to higher levels as the pyramid grew. While scholars debate the specific methods used, all proposed theories rely on technology and knowledge available to ancient Egyptians. No theory requires advanced machinery, extraterrestrial intervention, or supernatural forces. The internal structure of pyramids reflects practical engineering rather than mysterious purposes. The relieving chambers above the king's chamber in the Great Pyramid serve to distribute the enormous weight of the stone above, preventing the ceiling of the burial chamber from crushing under the pyramid's weight. These chambers demonstrate understanding of structural engineering principles. The narrow shafts found in some pyramids may have served as ventilation to maintain air quality during construction and burial preparations. The internal passages allowed workers and priests to move through the structure without disturbing the outer walls. Some shafts point toward specific stars, but whether this was for astronomical significance or practical building purposes remains debated among scholars. The comparison with other ancient monumental constructions provides perspective. The construction of massive structures was not unique to Egypt. The building of temples, fortifications, aqueducts, and other public works in civilizations across the world demonstrates that human societies have long possessed the capability to organize labor and construct ambitious projects. The Roman aqueducts, the Great Wall of China, the Angkor temples of Cambodia, and the Mayan pyramids all represent similar achievements in different times and places. These projects used different materials and techniques, but required similar levels of organization, engineering knowledge, and labor coordination. The Egyptian pyramids were remarkable, but not unique in representing human capability for monumental construction. Modern experimental archaeology has provided concrete demonstrations that pyramid construction using ancient methods was entirely feasible. Teams have successfully moved multi-ton stone blocks using copper tools, wooden sledges, and ropes. Researchers have shown that water-dampened sand significantly reduces the friction needed to drag heavy objects, making the transportation process more efficient. Experiments with block positioning have demonstrated that teams of workers can achieve the precision seen in pyramid construction using simple leveling and alignment tools. These experiments don't prove exactly how the ancients did it, but they conclusively demonstrate that the methods were possible with available technology and knowledge. The periodization of pyramid construction shows an interesting pattern that tells us much about how knowledge accumulated and refined. The early pyramids, like the Djoser pyramid, show experimental design with their step construction. The bent pyramid represents a transitional form with visible design modifications mid-construction. Later pyramids became more refined, with smoother sides and more efficient construction. The pyramid building era eventually declined, with later pyramids being smaller and of lower quality. This pattern shows that pyramid construction wasn't a static tradition employing unchanging methods, but a dynamic practice where builders continuously refine their techniques based on experience and experimentation. This is exactly what we would expect from a human-developed technology, not from a technique that relied on external knowledge. The labor investment required for pyramid construction was enormous, but it was distributed across time and distributed across the population. A workforce of 30,000 working in rotating shifts over 20 to 30 years represents a significant commitment of resources, but it's a commitment that an organized state with substantial agricultural surplus could sustain. Egypt's wealth, derived primarily from agriculture made productive by the Nile's annual floods. Harvest provided surplus grain that could be stored and used to feed construction workers. The central government's ability to organize, supply, and manage this workforce demonstrates the sophistication of Egyptian administrative systems. The question of why pyramid construction eventually ceased is also instructive. As time passed, pyramid construction became less frequent and less ambitious. Later pyramids were smaller and sometimes constructed with less precision. Eventually, pharaohs stopped building pyramids altogether, opting instead for rock-cut tombs in the Valley of the Kings. This shift reflected changing religious beliefs, different approaches to ensuring pharaonic immortality, and possibly economic changes that made the enormous investment in pyramid construction less practical. This decline and shift demonstrate that pyramid construction wasn't driven by an imperative technology or an external source of knowledge, but by specific religious and cultural values that eventually changed. The evidence accumulated over centuries of archaeological research creates a coherent picture of how the pyramids were actually built. The picture that emerges is one of remarkable human achievement by people who understood mathematics, engineering, and social organization. It's a picture of workers who were valued members of society, not brutalized slaves. It's a picture of careful planning, methodical execution, and continuous refinement of techniques. It's a picture of a state powerful enough to organize such an enormous project and wealthy enough to sustain it. Perhaps most importantly, it's a picture of human beings, like us, with minds capable of conceiving and executing ambitious plans, with the determination to see those plans through despite enormous challenges, and with the ingenuity to solve problems using available resources and knowledge. The mystery surrounding pyramid construction exists primarily because we have difficulty imagining that ancient people could accomplish something so extraordinary. That skepticism reveals more about modern biases than about ancient capabilities. We have become so dependent on technology that we assume that major accomplishments require advanced machinery. But the pyramids teach us that human organization, ingenuity, and determination can accomplish remarkable things, even with simple tools. The real story of the pyramids is not one of mysteries and unanswered questions, but of human capability demonstrated across millennia. Every discovery by archaeologists, every experiment by modern researchers testing ancient methods, every artifact excavated from pyramid sites adds another piece to a picture that is far more impressive than any conspiracy theory because it's grounded in evidence and reflects genuine human achievement. The pyramids weren't built by aliens or by lost advanced technologies. They were built by people, and that makes them infinitely more remarkable. When we understand the evidence, when we recognize the sophistication of ancient Egyptian engineering and organization, we appreciate what the pyramids truly represent. the height of human achievement in an ancient age.